Welcome to Real Talk Christian Podcast, where we drink coffee and have real conversations on faith, culture, and society. I'm Marc Hyde.
Wow, you messed that up real bad. You're Chris Fuller. I'm Marc Hyde. So, Fuller, what are we talking about tonight?
Wow, we are way out
What are we talking about, my dude?
We're talking about church history. Wow.
That was bad.
This is really bad, but
welcome to the show, folks.
Let's jump in, I guess.
So, talk about church history?
Let's go.
So what the heck was that opening?
I screwed up the opening.
I heard you bumble over your words a little bit. And I was
fumbled.
like,
I was like,
he's going to be okay. He's going to get back up.
I'm recovering good. And then I was like, I'm Marc Hyde. And then it didn't even hit me for like a good 5 seconds. I was like, you're like, wait, what? I'm like, wait,
you know what you reminded me of in that little moment? That when you're watching those hilarious videos of those guys who are like stumbling and you're like, oh, he's going to catch it. He's going to catch it. He's going to catch it. Nope, he fell and rolled down the hill. Like it was just a crash and burn.
I still blame
the fact that you said I'm Marc Hyde and then lost your mind. I'm like, what is happening right now? I'm in like I'm Inception right now.
I was thrown off by our previous earlier recording that lasted 10 seconds where
I messed that one
you
up.
messed the music up and then I had us on mute so nothing got recorded.
Well, I was making jokes. If I do this pad, that's wrong. If I do this pad, that's right. If I do that pad, we'll get sued. So
yeah, well, that was probably the worst opening we've had in a long time. I don't
know if we want to let the jury go out on that because I'm sure people's got opinions on what was terrible intros. But either way,
it was pretty
welcome to the show, my friends.
I am Chris Fuller. This is Marc Hyde.
I'm Marc Hyde. I am not Chris Fuller. I am the grass fairy, and he is the grizzly bear. If you have no idea what we're talking about, that means you need to go back and rewind to the early days of the episode.
That's like a long, long time ago.
I will say, dude, it's been hilarious. So in the Facebook group, it seems like more and more people are rewinding, which is awesome. But then people will say like they'll make some comment like in a good way about jokes that we used to make in the first season. And we're like, what are you talking about? Yeah, and Beth will be like, oh, yeah, you guys used to do that. I'm like, oh, okay. And then, we've had some questions about like, okay, so does your audio ever get better in this podcast? I'm like, well, after 200 episodes, I sure dang hope so.
And then we fumble on episode 205.
You know what? Sometimes it just happens. But you know what? We try our best to be a great podcast. We want to be a great community. We are not a great online dating site, in contrary to popular opinion.
All right, you got to tell the story to that.
Oh, man. Dude, okay, so we got a phone call, right? And so I saw the phone call come in. And normally, whenever you guys text RTC, it's always full of that answers. It's
9 times out of 10.
It is never me, but I did not feel like working. So I
find an excuse.
So the phone call came in and it was a voicemail. And I'm like, oh, let's just see what the voicemail says. Because when we get voicemails, it comes to our email.
Right.
So I read the voicemail and I'm like, what are we talking about? We're trying to log in. We're trying to figure something out. So I'm like, okay, is someone trying to figure out where our community is? Like, is it like a Patreon thing? Is it Facebook?
We don't log. We have no logins.
Yeah, so I was like, how do you log in and pay for the membership? And I'm like, well, first off, I mean, you could give us our money, but we don't really have a membership. So I don't know what you're talking about. And he goes, oh, wait, this isn't for like Real Talk online dating app? And I said, absolutely not.
We're Real Talk Christian Podcast.
I said, and then the message was like, I'll try to check that out too. So if you are the guy who shot us a message about the dating site and you're here listening, we are so thrilled that you are here. But yeah, no, we are not an online dating site.
No,
we do got some, single Christian. Well, I mean, we got some single Pringles who are ready to Christian mingle in the Facebook
group. Timeout. We kind of are because that's how you met your wife.
That is true.
So maybe they just got a little confused. Maybe they listened to that one episode and they're like, hey,
that's what we all was about. So basically, if you're single, try to go on some random Christian dude's podcast.
No,
you can marry
do
that guy.
Not follow that advice. I mean, it's good for you, but it's not good for everybody.
It's one of those like just because it worked doesn't mean what is it? It's not like an exception of a rule. Letter of the law. Basically, just because it happened once doesn't mean it's a.
It was an anonymous.
Yeah,
that word. Anonymous. I still can't say it. Wow. Do.
Welcome back to the show.
This is going to be a terrible
show.
So
did the coffee whack you in the face?
I don't know.
Or something?
There's a lot of reading in this episode. I'm kind of concerned right now.
Well, how about we talk about the coffee that we're drinking? Because we went back to our roots on this one.
Well, back to your roots.
Back to my roots.
Yeah, this is your roots. You're take me down to Africa. This is a you roots.
Oh, that type. Yeah. Okay. So yes, but I'm talking like because I would say last season and a half, we've just done drip coffee where we get excuse me, coffee burp.
Because
Man, we are really going back to our early days if we're doing coffee burps too. Where we just do the drip coffee, but we use really good coffee. We use really good water because it's easy and it's simple. And your boys work, come home, eat, and then we show up and podcast. So it's always really, really quick.
It is.
But I was like, dude, we went to a coffee shop up in St. Joe, Michigan, because over the weekend, last weekend, Beth and I went on a 2-night, 3-day staycation. So we didn't pay for hotels. We slept in our own beds. And no kid, besides Lennox, woke us up in the morning asking for snacks and breakfast and cries and tears and who can pick the show. And that person took my seat. It was glorious. And so each day,
those days
exactly. So, but so each day we went somewhere different. So we went to St. Joe, Michigan for one of the days, and we bounced to three different coffee shops. I think it got to the point where at the end, like I was like, I'm coffeeed out. So I just got Italian soda at the last one. But we did a place where they had coffee flights, which I know they got a place here in Elkhart that does, but we were texting you and Janelle during then. And so Beth got 4 different coffees. I got 4 different types of coffees. In case you're wondering, Irish coffee is kind of gross, but I tried it. Just so you know.
Yeah, it depends.
I had to put some sweet cream in it.
It's got a place.
It's got its place. But I put a little sweet cream in it. But so we had a bunch of different coffees for coffee flights. That was awesome. We went to another coffee shop, but we went to what was called rated the best coffee shop in St. Joe, Forte Coffee. And we brought some beans back, and I brought back
Africa.
I didn't bring the bag down here. Was it from? I think it was from the Congo.
No,
right? Or was it? Because it wasn't. Or was it Uganda?
Uganda.
Well, I'll confirm.
I think it was Uganda.
I'll confirm next episode. But we went back to my roots of African coffee because there was a while where I drank exclusive African coffee. Ethiopian was my jam.
That was like it.
I got
that was like a whole solid year.
Well, I also did a lot of stuff from Madagascar too. I did some stuff from Madagascar a little bit.
As much as you did Ethiopian.
And then I tried different styles of Ethiopians and dark roast, light roast. So this is a light roast.
I think it's Uganda.
It might be.
I think it is.
Because I've done Congo from other places before.
Yeah, this is, I think, the Ugandan one.
And so if you looked at the beans, it was like grounded to perfection. Like, in my opinion. I don't know what you thought about it. It's a very light roast. It's a very light roast.
It was pretty decently roasted.
It got like right to first crack and they stopped.
Well, that's the perfect place to stop.
Nailed it. There's
that's
no
where
grease.
you get all the acid from. Yes,
and I really wish I brought the bag down because it has like hints of lemon and citrus. And then what threw me off
citrus. I taste the cantaloupe.
Was the cantaloupe?
I taste the
cantaloupe.
What
threw me off is there's notes of cantaloupe in this coffee.
I don't taste the citrus.
But it's not the taste of the citrus. It's the bright acidic aftertaste at the end that it follows through with.
I don't get that. I get the acidicness of it being a light roast and that very earthy, pungent taste from Africa.
The African earthies, yes.
But
it's not airy at all.
I don't feel like I taste the brightness of a citrus.
I want to ask you, with this coffee, on the Fuller scale of 1 to 10, where would you put? Oh, and by the way, this is what I mean by we went to our roots. We did a Chemex tonight because we're supposed to do V60, and then your boy forgot the V60 filter.
And my filters are at work, so
we did Chemex pour over. We hadn't done pour overs in a very long time. So I mean, I nailed that bloom though.
It was a good bloom.
I freaking nailed that bloom.
Very good bloom.
And so we did it in the Chemex. We did it at a grind number 40, in case you're wondering. And then we poured some beautiful water on top of it. So what would you rate this coffee, my guy?
Well, see, over the past 2 years, I've really strayed away from liking the flavor of African coffees. So my opinion's a little biased on that. But for an African coffee, I would say it's pretty good for an African coffee. But
what would you rank this on a scale? Are you trying to not hurt my feelings?
I am not doing nothing.
I have a number in my mind.
I told you my opinion.
All right, here we go.
Biased.
No. We're gonna do a number on the count of 3. We're both gonna say our numbers, okay?
All right.
1, 2, 3, 7. 4. Holy crap!
I told you I'm biased against Africa. I said for an African coffee, it's decent.
I did not say, hey, I walked in with Folgers and we're going to drink some Folgers.
No, Folgers is the negative number, okay?
If you drink Folgers, we still love you. And you know, if you're rolling baller on a budget, Dave Ramsey style, you drink that Folgers because Dave Ramsey, that's the way it's supposed to be.
But mud tastes better.
Wow.
Sorry. Anyways.
See, this is a solid 7 for me because it has the brightness, it has the airiness of it.
This is the flavor profile that you really enjoy. So
it's true.
I understand why you would rank it at a 7, or I was actually thinking you were going to say an 8 or 9.
No, I've had better. But
for me, I've just gotten away from. I don't like the earthy, pungent taste as much. So I just got out of it.
And that's fair. And lately, I've been drinking. I mean, Beth has no clue what we drink. She just wakes up and drinks it.
She's like, "This is tasting like coffee."
Basically, now she can tell the difference between good coffee and bad coffee. She can tell that difference. But other than that, no. But we've been drinking African blends at home, or African blends. Forgive me, coffee peoples. African single origin. I have a Nicaraguan at home, and then I have this. I have a Main Street blend, which is like a Colombian, Brazilian, and another South American country from Napanee.
Mm-hmm.
And then I have that other breakfast blend from Red Rooster that we're drinking too. So, but yeah, I've been popping back into the African stuff lately just to get that. I don't know, man. There's something about that. It's not gritty. It's just
it's earthy.
It's earthy, and I'm here for it.
Yeah, it's earthy. I don't know how to explain it better than earthiness.
If we've lost you in terms of our nerdiness, welcome to the show.
But I've been drinking a lot of the Tekoa, right? Which is the local roaster, the local coffee shop here in Mishawaka.
Yep.
And the owner's name is Jeff. I won't use his last name just in case he doesn't want me to, because I didn't ask. But Jeff is Jiffy. Jeff is the good coffee roaster.
Is it Jeff or is it Geff?
It's Jeff.
Are you sure it's not Geff?
100% sure it's Jeff.
All right. so you've been drinking Tekoa, which
I've been drinking a lot of Tekoa.
Maybe next episode we'll drink Tekoa of the. What did you have? Honduran?
It was Brazilian. It was a single origin Brazilian. So the cool thing about this is this guy loves to roast competition grade coffee. Like that's what he roasts and sells is competition.
Did you just make a new word?
Competition. Yeah.
Welcome to the competition.
The competition. But the competition roasts. He was in Kentucky 2 weeks ago doing a competition down in Kentucky.
That's cool. I think Daddy's got coffee there. Daddy Got Coffee is an Instagram friend of mine.
Oh yeah?
Yeah.
Sweet.
He's a dad who
drinks
actually
coffee.
Well, he makes some good money being a coffee influencer on YouTube and Instagram. That's for sure. But like he'll do these reviews on these grinders and stuff. And I'm like, bro, dad is dropping $3,000 on a grinder. He goes, I know, but I got it for free.
All you got to do is tell him, look, we came up with a new word on the podcast, competition.
Competition. I feel like someone needs to,
that'd be awesome. That'd be awesome.
Let's have a competition.
It's time for a competition. And then it has like the different ways to drink coffee.
That'd be pretty good. And hey,
a dope shirt.
That'd be a really dope shirt. But you know what's gonna be really dope?
What's that?
I don't know if this show's gonna air before then or not. Is it gonna? No, this is probably airing after in Gedi, isn't it?
No, it's not. At Revive Fest, this is the first episode. No, this is like the last episode right before Revive Fest.
If it is, we want you at Revive Fest. Go to revivefest.com because
get your tickets today.
Revive Fest is only in like a month, and we just gave Matt Grimm our stuff for our workshop that we're doing, and I just gave him my stuff for my workshop that I'm doing today.
And I'm still working like a madman trying to get all the swag and stuff for the giveaways we're gonna do. I think we're gonna do like 15 giveaways the whole time. I'm gonna put together swag bags.
Did you buy more stuff?
No, this is just a normal
through the Bible commentary.
That's that commentary I told you we're going to do on the major study giveaway, the ancient faith, the systematic theology, the ultimate Bible. I
didn't realize it was that big. That's like five. That's 5 volumes, bro.
I know, bro. It's the whole Bible.
That's legit, like pastor grade.
It is.
Wow.
That's one of the ones that my father-in-law, he absolutely loves that commentary set, and it's really, really good.
That's pretty dope.
So it's very
that's pretty dope.
It's very good for lay people. It's like a very good commentary geared towards lay people. So
that's cool.
Yeah. I thought it was going to be a good little, hey, here you guys go. Here's a nice little study thing. And I even got highlighters, Bible highlighters to go with it, with this big.
With the Ancient Faith Study Bible, the one that me and the Soche love. Which side note, that's my daily, my weekly church Bible is the Ancient Faith. You take that one to church
every week.
See, I take just my normal Bible.
That's my church Bible.
Lately, though, guys.
Well, see, my normal study Bible is the NASB, though.
Oh, that's fair. Okay,
that's why.
Lately, I have not been taking my CSB to church, guys. I've been taking my Holman Christian, the HCSB.
Oh, the old school.
Because the print's bigger and it's easier.
He said, I'm getting old.
It's just easier for me to read. But either way, guys, just so you know, if you are in need of a Bible, please let us know. Send us an email. Now, we've always said send us a DM or whatever, but we found that if you send us an email, that's probably the best way to make sure we get it to where it needs to go.
And when you send your email, please, please, please give us your name and your address, right? Yep. You can't just send me your email and your name is shipwrecked 6954 and be like, hey, I want a Bible. And I'm like, my first question is going to be like, what's your name and where do you need a Bible sent to?
Yep. And so we do want to make sure we are giving those Bibles out to those who need. So if you do need a Bible, send us an email at realtalkchristianpodcast@gmail.com to get those Bibles. But we also give away mini swag bags.
We do.
For those people who leave us specifically Apple Podcast reviews. Now, this past week, did you see, courtesy of our Facebook group and my sister-in-law, that we reached over 1,000 ratings on Spotify?
Did we?
Which is stinking
Awesome.
wild.
Cool.
So we got over 1,000 reviews on Spotify. We ain't even close to that Apple Podcast, guys. So
no, we're like 169,
which is great.
Sure,
which is awesome.
Helps us get into the ears of other listeners. That's
Dale
why
Partridge has like 10,000. So we got to pick this game up, people.
But the real reason is not because we're trying to be boastful or prideful about it. It really is because we feel we're given good.
You're being muted. It's because we're being prideful and we want the pat on the back and because we want to feel awesome.
No, I think you're wrong now. And now you're muted. And so, no, but it's honestly, we feel like God has given us this mission field of this podcast, and we want to get into the ears of other listeners. And so that's why we do what we do, and we need your help to help spread the message. Actually, I was really encouraged to see we have a listener in Japan. Whoa. And it's like they emailed us this last week and they're like, hey, I'm out of Japan. I just want to say
that's awesome.
I'm very encouraged. I think it was on my personal Facebook email.
Oh, okay, cool.
But it's he's out of Japan and he's like, I'm listening to you over in Japan and using the stuff that you guys are talking about. And it's like, that's awesome. Like it's really really exciting to see where God is taking
we got listeners over in England, in Scotland, in New Zealand, and Canada. We love our Canadian friends. Is Texas its own? I think Texas is its own country. So we got listeners out in Texas, and honestly, all over. I mean, we've even had the one person, which if you're still listening, I don't remember your name, but in the Indian U.S. consulate office over in India, right?
Yep.
We had some people listening over there. We got people listening in Africa. We got people listening all over Europe and Asia. This is thinking. We got Peru. Our friends Joe and Kimberly down in Peru.
God has taken this and it made it just explode, and we're just so thankful to be a part of it.
But if you do live in the United States and you leave us an Apple Podcast review, and then we read it on the show, we will get you a mini swag bag in the mail. So I'm going to read today's review because you're about to do a lot more talking than what I am. So I'll read this, and then I will literally pass you the ball and
set.
And I'm just going to hang out because you know how hard it is to be like, all right, Mark, we're going to do church history, and I have a lot to read. So I just have to sit here and shut up about church history.
No, you don't have to shut up. We can talk in between. I'm just saying it's more of a, hey, here's some information before we get into the conversation. See? That
sounds good to me.
It's just a setup. It's just a long setup.
That's fair. Because when we do the next episode and when we're continuing the 7 Deadly Sins on envy, there's a lot of setup there too.
Yeah.
So let's read this review. This is from JD, which is really funny.
I always love these types of
names. Are so great. I've been listening for 2 months now and hearing them say, leave a review, and I never got to, so I am sorry. But you guys deserve a 5-star review, so thank you for leaving one. Thank the Lord for you guys. Your podcast has helped me through my workday. It gives me an opportunity to have a peaceful and sound mind while I work, all while learning about Jesus. Thank you, Mark and Chris. I appreciate everything you do. Keep letting Jesus use you. By the way, my name is Nick, and I will DM you on Instagram for the possible swag bag. Thank you, good sir. So, and Nick, if you did send us a DM,
I think so.
Did you send us already?
I think we've already sent this one out. I'm pretty
Janelle,
sure.
Can you confirm?
I'm pretty sure we sent this one out. So I'll have to go back through the notes and look.
But either way, go to Apple Podcasts because that's really right now the only place you can leave a physical review. Google Podcasts don't do it. Pandora don't do it. Spotify don't do it. But go to Apple Podcasts. If you are not an Apple user, my first question is how dare you? Second, just sign into applepodcast.com and you'll be good to go. So either way, Nick, thank you for that review,
Appreciate it.
So I'm going to pass you the ball. And here we go, talking about church history.
Well, church history has been very prevalent on my mind as of late, ever since my father-in-law got me hooked on another podcast, and I think I've mentioned it here before, of Men Who Rock the World by Stephen J. Lawson.
Some good stuff.
Ligonier Ministry. I think he took over for R.C. Sproul when R.C. Sproul passed away.
Oh, that makes sense, actually.
So it was just, it's been pretty cool to hear his teaching, and really he's just not even teaching. It's just him walking through the history of some of the early church fathers, basically from Luther on.
Yep. A lot of the Puritans. He does a lot of the Puritans.
Very much of the Puritans, but just hearing, I never knew how much of a hero George Whitefield was to me until I listened to his 3-part rendition about George Whitefield's life. And I go, all right, hands down, I think he's better than Luther. Don't stone me.
I actually, I have an article that's in my to read later category of, have Americans glorified Luther too much? I have a reading that I need to read.
Well, it's just because that's the big name that everybody knows, I think.
Yep.
I don't think it has anything to do past that. They're just like, oh, he started the Protestant movement. He's the greatest.
Nope. Go Anabaptist.
But George Whitefield preached until he died.
Literally.
Literally. He died hours after he gave his last sermon from a porch that he was sitting at a house where thousands of people gathered.
Well, and if you literally look at that man's itinerary where he was preaching all over the place. He was being and churches in I think it was in America, they were literally saying, nope, you're speaking literally he was going toe to toe with their liberal theology.
Yes.
And just whacking. So they kicked him out of their church. So he goes, screw it, I'm gonna go preach in the field like Jesus did.
And he did. And they said he could project his voice. I want to say it was to
5,000, 10,000?
10,000 people. He could project his voice out in the middle of a field out to 10,000 people.
And people did not realize how Jesus could have done it. And they're like, oh, well, no, this is it.
The cool thing was they followed him from town to town.
Yes.
Just like they did with Jesus. It was amazing, his ministry, and how when he would go to a town, like people would like drop their plows in the field and like jump on horseback and like ride and run to the town. There was this, I forget who it was. It was somebody that in history, but they were talking about him and his wife. He told his wife, get your stuff, let's go right now. And he made her run behind the horse as he rode the horse to go hear George Whitefield. And when the horse got tired, it's terrible. When the horse got tired, then he would throw his wife on the horse and he would run until the horse regained its breath. And then he'd make his wife get back off. He'd jump back on the horse. How terrible is that?
That's awful.
It's terrible just to hear this guy. I'm like, yeah, you needed to hear this.
You definitely needed to hear Jesus. But the cool thing, though, and this is a challenge for you guys who are listening, George Whitefield did not grow up as a Christian. The dude grew up in a tavern with a mom who did not do very good things and a dad who was not present. And so what was his thing? Like he could cuss as good as a sailor or just as good as wrestling by the age of like 5.
He made sailors blush by like the age of 5 or 8
he would
or
make
something
money
like that.
Because it was so funny. But he went to like acting school and he learned how to project his voice and how to present and how to use his body in such a way to do these massive productions. And then when he got saved, he used that gifting, all this training that he learned from the tavern with interacting with people.
Exactly. It's like God set him up for it.
And does your past affect your future? Well, no, God uses your past in such a way to use your gifts and talents and abilities. Like everything you had to go through in the past was for God to use it now in the future. And that's the same thing with George Whitefield.
Yeah, it's just an amazing story. I would encourage you guys to go check out at least.
What was it? The Men Who Changed the World?
The Men Who Rocked the World by Stephen J. Lawson.
And the artwork is I'm pulling up. It's like black with like that. Yeah. Black like with the little globe.
Yeah, the little globe. And it says
Men Who Rocked the World was Stephen J. Lawson.
Yeah. It's a phenomenal one. I would encourage you, if you don't listen to anything else, just to go and listen to.
He just dropped the Spurgeon episode 5 hours ago.
Woohoo! Spurgeon's another good one. Anyways, so that's kind of why I wanted to write about and speak about and talk about this topic tonight. And I know Mark is a huge fan of church history.
No.
Just a little bit. He's just a little obsessed. So I knew that this has always been his passion. We've talked about doing church history in the past. He's wanted to do it. And I'm like, you know what? Now's the time to do it. And he doesn't even need to prep for it because he's so good at knowing it. So,
well, let's not go that far.
You're pretty good.
Okay.
So, but first, before we dive into some of how the church history is broken up and like what we call age of church history is, what is church history, right? And what is it, right? We hear church. Is this like every history, like where the church went? Well, the history of the church, Christian church, is the study of the fatherhood of God. It documents redemptive history and God's gracious providence of his eternal covenant completed by Christ and applied by the Spirit of grace. John Payne rightly said, if church history does not get your blood pumping, you'd better go check your spiritual pulse. The 16th century alone provides a treasure of soul-stirring narratives. Think of Martin Luther's bold and daring stand for the gospel against the destructive errors of Rome. Consider the faithful witness of the English martyrs who died singing psalms as they were consumed by flames. Or how about the courageous life of John Knox, who, while enslaved in the bowels of the French galley ship, cried out, "Give me Scotland, or I will die."
He's a Presbyterian. That's where Presbyterians came from, was this guy.
Yeah. So, and I mean, there's so many more. I think of, William Tyndale and
John Charles Wesley and John Owen.
Right. Oh, all sorts of.
You can go back to Calvin and Zwingli and then the whole Anabaptist tradition.
So much. But I loved what this came from reform.org church. It'll be in the show notes. But I really love this. If church history doesn't get your blood pumping, you'd better check your spiritual pulse. And the reason why I love that little saying right there from John Payne is because I have never really been much of a church history guy. I've gone through the classes, but when I started listening to this Men Who Rock the World, for some reason, something was awakened in my spirit and really did get my blood pumping. When you find out, man, I always I'm scared to go talk to my colleague at work about Christ. And these people were like fearless, like who was it? There's one of them, and I don't think I put him in here. He was not a bishop, but he was a Christian who renounced Christ, and then he ended up going back out and preaching Christ, and so he was getting taken to be burned to death.
That was
and he put his hand in the flame.
Yep.
Because it was the hand that he'd renounced Christ with.
Yep.
And so he burned his own hand first and said, I have to cleanse the first thing that betrayed my faith.
Crap. I don't remember who that was. That was with Bloody Mary.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. So just the stories of the courage and the faithfulness of these Christians from the past who really, like we talked about George Whitefield, were nobodies, right? That God brought out and used in such a powerful way to rock the world.
And that's it. We're not trying to put these guys up on pedestals, but I will say this, when we read in Hebrews that we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us also run the race with integrity. And I think that's what this idea is supposed to be. Right. We had this conversation about should we have prayers to the saints or not, where it's like, God's not the God of the dead, but God of the living. Yes, we both agree with that, but we're also like, we're not supposed to, we don't pray to saints because Jesus said when you pray to God the Father directly. And a lot of other things were like, well, it just seems weird to pray to dead people. But when we study these church history guys, it makes you do one of two things. One of it is more the fact of like, dang, I need to step it up in my Christian walk, because like you hear that these guys that just go ballistic for Jesus, and you're like, oh my goodness, what am I doing with my life? And it's one of those things where it's like, oh, if he could do it, I could do it too.
It's an encouragement.
Let's do it. Let's keep going. But then the other thing that church history does, the second fold of it, is the fact of, what's that passage in Ecclesiastes where there's nothing new under the sun? Every problem, every accusation against Christianity, every heresy that we're dealing with right now in the church has already dealt with over the years.
It's just gotten a new name.
It's just
the
has
same
a new
heresy.
like even the what do they call it? There was the New Age. It was part of the age of skepticism, and I can't think of what it was called, what the New Age atheism was called. But like Christianity has already come to the defense, and now all of a sudden, skeptics and atheists are starting to go, "Oh, these arguments, like the Richard Dawkins arguments, and
you're thinking
of those ones,
like
I can't.
The Age of Enlightenment.
No, I can't think what. No, like right now.
Oh, okay.
Like right now, Richard Dawkins and Hawkins, and a lot of these other atheist apologists. Their arguments are starting to fall apart because Christianity is defending it. Well, if you look at the arguments they have, these are the same arguments they had 1,000 years ago.
Right.
And so when we're dealing with the problems of the world today, and you hear Christians who are deconstructing their faith, they're like, "Oh, I can't believe no one ever talked about this. No one ever taught me this." Well, you ding back, go read a church history book. They sure dang talked about it.
Yeah, exactly.
And so that's the beautiful thing with church history, is it helps us understand the problems and the heresies and the other teachings that we're dealing with. But it also puts some fire under our butt to be like, let's do it. Now, granted, you should not have a marriage like, was it John Wesley or Charles Wesley had a terrible marriage. Terrible. Billy Sunday also had a terrible marriage too. So we can't follow everything. But it can at least give you a lot of encouragement along the way.
Billy Sunday's thought process was, hey, my wife's going to stay at home and I'm going to go preach the gospel, and then I'll come back every couple of months for like a week, and then I'll go back out again. That was like Billy Sunday. Like
it was like it was like Navy SEAL level.
Yeah, it was terrible.
But anyway, keep going, man.
All right, so talking about how it kind of we're very excited about talking about church history, but want to kind of go through what the ages of church was, or church history. So this comes from the ChristianHistoryInstitute.org, and again this link will be in the show notes. So how was the church history broken up? So the very, 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 very first age that we had was the age of Jesus and the apostles, right? And this is rough estimate, right? This is where we think we have a good idea of this. So there was the age of Jesus and the apostles was from 27 AD to 70 AD. Again, there might be some discrepancy on years either side, but that's the closest that everybody can semi-agree to, right, during that age of time. So what was that? Well, from a handful of fishermen, tax collectors, and youthful troublemakers in an obscure province of Judea, Christians have always been considered the age of Jesus and his apostles a kind of model for all other ages. It gave the church its faith in Jesus, the resurrected Messiah, and the hope of forgiveness of sins through him. And the age demonstrated in the life of Paul that the gospel of grace recognizes no boundaries of nation, race, sex, or culture. So, point A.
It starts with Jesus.
Starting point, Jesus, right?
Church starts with Jesus.
Right. So
now we're a continuation of the Jewish faith, but the church age starts with Jesus and his disciples,
right?
The 12.
So then we from there we go into the age of Catholic Christianity, right? And so this is where when we read the Apostles' Creed and it talks about one holy Catholic Church, this is the version of Catholic Church that this narrow point in history of what it was referring to, right?
Yep.
Is the age of Catholic Christianity, which was 70 AD and ended in 312 AD. So Catholic Christianity, which accepted this truth, spread rapidly throughout the Mediterranean world. It confronted the alien ideas of the Gnosticism, Marcionism, what is that one?
Montanism.
There you go. And called a lie by appealing to the apostolic writings and to the Orthodox bishops who guarded them. At the same time, Christians faced the persecuting power of Rome and dared to die heroically as martyrs, witnesses to other believers to follow in their train. The seed of the martyr's blood, as Tertullian called it, eventually bore abundant fruit in the conversion of the empire.
Yep. And this is where it gets really interesting, because this is where a lot of other faiths say Christianity went awry. So if you look at the writings of Joseph Smith, right. Mormonism, which, side note, Joseph Smith thinks that every writing talked about Jesus was actually him. It's kind of weird. But he would say that, oh no, the apostles had it right. We need to go back to the faith of Jesus and the apostles, and they got all screwed up here in this weird gap where went from Jesus to the Council of Nicaea, and then Christianity just
it's gone. And
exploded.
This is we lost the writings, the true writings. So here's the new writings.
And so when you talk to Mormons, Jehovah's Witnesses, also even Islam kind of plays into this role as well. As we lost what the real meaning of Christianity is.
Right.
I mean, shoot, even Seventh-day Adventists talk about it a little bit, where they're like, oh, we got to get back to historic Christianity. We want to get back to the New Testament church. Sure. Whenever people say we want to get back to the original New Testament church, it's throwing away a lot of different things. But a lot of times people believe that Christianity was either A, lost, or B, it was all made up in this 300-year period where we don't have the Bible. We didn't have a Bible at this time. So how are we supposed to do this? Were they just making up their teachings? All the letters that we have that were finally, quote unquote, written by the time the Council of Nicaea came in, were they just all made up and fabricated?
Were they full of errors?
Were they full of errors? Yeah, and then how does all these doctrinal things work? And now the cool thing is, in this period, we do have a lot of writings with Justin Martyr.
Right.
One of the first, where we get the term martyr from, dying for your faith, was because of Justin Martyr with defending and apologetics. He was one of the first apologists. Mm-hmm. We have a lot of other writings for people in this time too. As Polycarp, disciple of Peter, and a few other church fathers. We still have some of those. Right? Clement of Rome. I think Saint Basil was after Council of Nicaea. He was late 4th century, because we'll talk about him in the MV episode. But during this time period, a lot of people think that either A, Christianity went buck wild crazy, or B, it started to formulate its own little fake idea and all these fake things. And it wasn't until the church was created at the Council of Nicaea, was all formed together. But in reality,
it was all Rome.
They actually had the holy scriptures that we have. They just had them in letter format or parchment format, and there was a universal consensus of these are the letters we use.
Well, they were still being passed around, and a lot of these guys during this time period, from 70 to 312, were students of the apostles. Right. They were disciples of the apostles. All the way to a disciple of the apostles, right? And so that they guarded these letters from the apostles very closely, and
because these were in their mind the holy writings about Jesus and the church.
And when they copied it, it was meticulous. They meticulously copied these, and that's why. I mean, you do find some errors, but that's when the church formulated the Bible in the next age, the age of the Christian Empire. At the Council of Nicaea. All they were doing is they looked at the what was it, three building blocks of what it had to be. They had to be widely by apostle or a disciple of an apostle.
And it had to be widely already accepted in the
amongst the church. And then there was one more.
Oh goodness,
I know the two, but I thought there was one more, that it was a pillar, the 3 pillars of it all. It was widely accepted amongst the church. It was had to be directly written by an apostle or a student of an apostle. And
it had to involve apostolic content.
That's right.
So it had to be actually not just written by an apostle, but talking about the church and Jesus.
Having the same context and content that was universal, or not universal, that was cohesive.
Right.
Cohesive with the rest of Scripture.
And that's the thing, whenever Paul wrote a letter to a church, we have belief in, I don't know if we have written argument or evidence for it, that the church then would take that letter, recopy that letter and send it off and keep it going.
Well,
so letters were scattered across the empire. So no, Christians didn't have a Bible in their hand, but what they did have was a message of
the writings and the teachings from the apostles.
Yep, and that's why in Acts 2:32 it says they devoted themselves to the breaking of bread, the fellowship, the prayers of the saints, and the teaching of the apostles.
Right.
And so since the early days of the church, they sat at the feet of the apostles. And that's why us as Protestants, that's kind of where the Catholic conversation comes in.
Right.
We only ascribe to what's in the canon and not the fact of, oh, the canon's open and people can add to it and the Pope can add things and these church fathers can add things. And we go, absolutely not.
Right.
Because we have the writings from the people who were kind of, with Jesus.
They were the disciples, and they were the ones that were instructed to go and teach the things I've taught you and make disciples.
Message from the king.
So
it's like Hamilton, a message from the king. And when it's a message from the king, King Jesus, you better sit down, shut up, and pay attention.
Calm down.
You don't know what message from the king is. Dude.
Calm down, Kanye.
That's when Christoph comes out, the King of England, and
all right,
sings. It's really fun.
We're gonna move on. So the next age, as we previously mentioned, was the age of the Christian Empire. This is from 312 AD to 590 AD. The imperial age began in 312 when Constantine caught a vision of Christ. Before the 4th century closed, Christianity became the official religion of the sprawling Roman state. A church in the catacombs was one thing, but what does Christianity have to do with palaces? Under the emperor's tutelage, the church learned to serve the seats of power by formulating the faith for the masses, hence the age of great councils. Those Christians who had no yen for palaces headed for the wilderness in search of another way to grace. Revered hermits soon found themselves in a vanguard of a movement, monasticism, and the wave of the future.
Yep.
So this is where all the councils happen.
Yep. And in case people want to say Constantine didn't make the church and he didn't make the things, literally what it was is the church was literally at war with itself about this is when Saint Nick punched a fool. Was they were arguing over the divinity and the humanity of Jesus with Arius and Saint Nick and punched him.
Santa Claus knocked him out with the right.
And so there were literally arguments happening everywhere. So the Council of Nicaea was not in the better interest of the church. It was the better interest of he still wanted to kind of have power and kingdom.
Right.
And we all have to figure this stuff out of what we actually believe. And so we did a lot of good things with that. But we also have to know that Constantine did not make Christianity the official religion of the empire. He just said, we're no longer going to kill you anymore.
Yeah, he stopped. Yeah, exactly. He stopped the persecution of the church.
Yep.
And he became a Christian himself. I use that term loosely because of his history.
Yep.
But it doesn't change the fact of there were still church fathers battling these out and councils, the Council of Nicaea.
Yep.
The what were some of the other ones? Help me out here. Council of Nicaea.
Shoot.
Man, I am drawing a blank
I'm
tonight.
pulling up
This
all
is
the
terrible.
Catholic. I'm like Council of Trent, Council of Trent 2, Council of Edict of Worms. That's all later.
Those are all in that same time period, though. Some of those.
There's a Council of Constantinople.
Yep. But this is where they battled out a lot of the doctrinal things and a lot of the errors, right? This is where they're like, no, right. This is where they're like, no, we're gonna stick to the apostolic teachings of the apostles, and this is what they are, and this is why this is the format of why we are canonizing these 26 books of the New Testament.
Yep.
And so,
but as the Christian empire grew and Christianity became more and more popular, it soon became the official religion of the Roman Empire, the Holy Roman Empire, which then leads into the next fun category. This is where it gets butt crazy. And this is where anybody who is not of the faith, this is where they hit us, right?
Yep. The Christian Middle Ages, 590 to 1517 AD. This is what I consider the dark period of the church.
Yep. But there's a lot of cool things since Augustine came out of this.
There's some really cool things that happen here, but that's the things. This is what people's view of Christians are for all eternity most of the time. Because anytime I've gotten into a debate with any non-Christian, this always comes up. Always. Well, what about the Middle Ages? And all right, we're going to talk about it. So most Christians, however, saw the hand of God in a happy wedding of a Christian church and Roman state. In the East, the marriage continued for millennia. Mystical piety flourished under the protection of the Orthodox empires until 1453, when invading Muslim Turks brought the Byzantine Empire to a final ruin. The fall of Constantinople, however, meant the rise of Moscow, the new capital of the Eastern Orthodoxy. In In the West, it was a different story. After the 5th century, when barbarian Germans and Huns shattered the empire's defense and swept into the eternal city of Rome itself, men turned to the Augustine's city of God for explanations. They found a vision for a new age. We call these centuries medieval. People who lived in them considered them Christian. Their reasons lie in the role of the Pope, who stepped into the ruins of the fallen empire in the West and proceeded to build the medieval church upon Rome's bygone glory. As the only surviving link with the Roman past, the Church of Rome mobilized
Benedictine.
Thank you. Monks and deployed them as missionary ambassadors to the German people. It took centuries, but the popes, aided by Christian princes, slowly pacified and baptized a continent and called it Christendom, or Christian Europe. Baptized masses, however, meant baptized pagans. By the 10th century, spiritual renewal was an obvious necessity. It started in a monastery in central France called Cluny, one of the two, and spread until it reached the papacy itself. The greatest of the reforming popes was Gregory VII. His zealous successor carried the papal office to the zenith of the earthly power. No longer the cement of the Roman Empire, the church of the 12th century was itself a kind of empire, a spiritual and earthly kingdom stretching from Ireland to Palestine and from earth to heaven. The Crusades and the scholastic philosophy were witnesses to this papal sovereignty. Power, however, corrupts. The church gained the world but lost its soul. That, at any rate, is when a steady stream of reformers preached, Waldenese, Franciscans, Albigenese, amid the strife for earthly power and the evidence of barren religion in the 14th and 15th centuries, many Christians turned to the Bible for a fresh vision and renewal. So during this time of the Middle Ages, this is when the Crusades happened. This is when we're going to take back the Holy Land. We're going to kill the infidels.
No, I mean, a lot of really cool people came out. Like you mentioned, St. Augustine, City of God and City of Man. And I had to look him up. I'm like, I can't think what the homeboy's name was, but good old St. Francis, Henry's Saint from Madam Secretary. That was his boy. Good old St. Frankie. So you got St. Francis. You had a lot of other saints. St. Frankie. But you had a lot of different saints who, to their credit, although yes, being Catholic, because that's just what you were, they were actually working out the apologetic defense and the mysteries of the faith and how all these different things work. But, this is where the argument comes where, or if you want to read a fascinating book around this idea of when Christianity went from the fringes to the center, the farther it got from Jesus. It's like they say that when Christianity is on the fringes, it was closer to Jesus, but when it was in the middle of the empire, it was at furthest from Jesus.
When it had power,
because ultimate power ultimately corrupts. And so there's a book out there called The Naked Anabaptist that kind of talks about this, and it's in a really, really cool book about that, which it's come the Anabaptist Mennonite tradition, not Mennonite, because they say the Amish and the Mennonites are weird. This is British Anabaptist. And so it's a fascinating read for that. But this is where we see the, I would say, corruption of the church in terms of, in my opinion, a lot of things that we see now, like with the Hillsong movement, which have you seen the documentary about the Duggars yet? The Shiny Happy People?
I have not. I've wanted to watch it.
It's gut wrenching.
Is it?
It's absolutely. So you got I always get the acronyms wrong. The IBLF, the Institute for Baptist.
Yes, I know what you're talking. Yep.
And so you have all these different organizations. They keep rising to power, and then what happens? You find out that their organizations are literally corrupt all the way through with sexual misconduct and financial embezzlement. And you got these pastors who are living off these multi-million-dollar stipends, like James McDonald, even in Chicago. And so it's the idea of the more power these people get, the more it just all collapses under their feet. How much more when it's the entire empire, where you have money at your disposal, and you got people's souls hanging in the balance? Because this is what I'm really curious about, the everyday people, right? The ones out working in the field, the ones that are out working in the mills, they are trying to follow Jesus to the best of their abilities. And you got these, and now, yes, don't get me wrong, there were still amazing priests and amazing people and amazing saints who were doing their absolute hardest to lead people true Christianity and true Jesus. There were people in there like that. But when you have so much corruption coming out of the kings and the queens and the bishops,
the papacy,
and then there was what is it called where you give all the positions to people in your family? What is that called?
Inheritance?
No, not inheritance, but basically it's like you give all these other seats, position of power to like cousins.
Oh, yeah.
It's not nepotism. Is it nepotism? It might be nepotism, but they were given like the seats of like, we're talking like the Bishop of Canterbury to someone who literally has like multiple obvious sex partners,
right?
Like straight and gay. Like it's some weird crap out there going on. And so all of a sudden people who are not loving Jesus, they just love power, are in these holy positions. All of a sudden the people in the pew are no longer able to actually worship because all they had was the mass and all they had was the service and the readings.
But the way to keep themselves in power during this time was to make the laymen illiterate, right? And so this is where you weren't allowed to have it in your own language, because there was some times during this time where people did try to bring stuff in their own language and it was forbidden. And so, this is where they're trying to remain in power. They destroyed the understanding and the lives of the church.
Because John, I pull up what year it was, but John Wycliffe in 1382 wrote the first English Bible, and he died at the stake, literally because he wrote a Bible in common language. This is why Martin Luther, he also wrote a Bible in the common German vernacular.
I think
the Genevan Bible.
And I think that's the same time Tyndale wrote his and died at the stake, was that same time period.
Had it been. So I'll look it up. You keep talking.
I think Wycliffe and him worked together, if I remember correctly. So during that time, there was men of God that were trying to bring the word of God back to the common folk, right? Read it for yourself.
So Tyndale was he died at 1536. So he died
right during the beginning of the Reformation. He died
during the revolt. Right. So he was born during this.
Right. So so that means, if I remember correctly,
that
would mean 1538 is when he died, as you said.
Yep.
So he would have been at the tail end, because this is the age of Reformation,
right? So he was
probably working on translations
the English side at the same time with Luther. But this is where all of a sudden people started. This is where the idea of purgatory showed up. This is where the idea of
the penance and all that stuff.
We are the people. Like this is where the separation between the sacred and the secular start, if you look at it historically, where it's like, and we still deal with it today in our culture of, oh no, that's the sacred, that's the secular. He's the man of God. We're just a little plebeians. We're the parishioners. He's the person who gets to appear before God.
I'm not worthy enough to confess my sins to Christ, so I confess them to my priest, who then confesses them
because
on my behalf.
Is the priest who can only talk to God. Now Catholics have a different.
The Pope is the vicar of Christ.
Correct, and not just the vicar of Christ, but literally Jesus on the throne. And if you go against the Pope,
you go against God.
Go against God himself. And so you have, and so I would love to know when we get to heaven one day, and on the new earth, we're just talking with people who lived through this period where it's like, so because God's a just God, right? And so my question is, all these people who are trying to follow God the best they could, but they were stuck with these absolute terrible people. What became of these souls?
Not understanding, right? Being taught bad theology.
Well, not even as bad, but
who Christ really was.
I mean, up until even recently, the mass was in Latin, so people couldn't even understand it. They weren't allowed to read the scriptures. Now, I will say though, medieval times, this is where a lot of amazing artwork happened, though, right? Medieval artwork is some of my favorite artwork, and the stained glass windows, and so people were illiterate, so they could see the pictures and the stories of Jesus, and so they knew the basics of Jesus. This is where Stations of the Cross starts to come into play,
right?
But at the end of the day, the church became a corrupt money laundering scheme where they even started now telling people, in order for you to, if you want your father and mother to get into heaven, you probably should pay us money to make sure your soul gets an easy pass, which then funded the Crusades, which is what are called the indulgences, which is why good old Martin Luther decided to nail, he felt it was a good time to nail some 95 theses,
which leads us to the next age. And let's try to. This is probably going to be a two-parter, Mark. I'm sorry.
Oh man,
we got a lot.
Holy crap, we're doing good though.
So we'll finish up the different ages, and we'll stop it at the different ages, and then we'll jump into the next episode with the continuation of this. How's that sound?
So I'll shut up and let you finish.
No, you don't have to shut up. I'm looking at the time. We have. At the time of recording, we got to go live on Facebook.
In 20 minutes. Let's
go. So we're going to try to get through this, not as fast as possible, but quickly. So the Age of Reformation, 1517 AD to 1648 AD. Reform came with a fury. Martin Luther sounded the trumpet, but hosts of others rallied to the cause. The period we call the Reformation marks the mobilization of Protestantism, Lutheran, Reformed, Anglican, and Anabaptist. By the mid-16th century of the Reformation had shattered the traditional unity of Western Europe and had bequeathed to modern time religious pluralism. Wow.
That was fun.
Yeah. This is what happens when you just copy and paste somebody else's stuff. The Church of Rome resisted this attack upon tradition. She mustered new troops, especially the Society of Jesus. She sent out fresh waves of missionaries to Asia, Africa, and Latin America. She waged war in France, the Netherlands, and Germany. But in the end, Christendom slipped into yesteryear. In its place arose the denominational concept of the church, which allowed modern nations to treat the churches as voluntary societies separate from the state. So this is where we see the split
and a lot of bloodshed.
The big chasm. Yes, a lot of martyrdom from the Protestant side. A lot of Protestants were martyred. So,
and Catholics too. It's whoever happened to be king was killing the other.
That was the problem. So that's because there was a Protestant king right before Bloody Mary took the throne, I think, right?
And then after her was Elizabeth, and then she was a Protestant, and then so all of a sudden, and then they were trying to have like a Protestant and Catholic usurpations of what were those super bloody days called? Shoot, I can't think the something massacre. I can't. Why can't I think what that massacre was called?
I just listened to it like 2 weeks ago too.
Oh, this happens when you only read church history over so often. The something day massacre. It was on a holy day or whatever it was. But either way,
yes,
with this situation of the age of Reformation, there was a lot of good things that came of the Reformation. And honestly,
there's a lot of turmoil during this period, though.
And I would say the modern Roman Catholic Church, and we're not even talking about Eastern Orthodox history, because that even has a whole, we're talking mainly Western Christianity.
Right.
Because after the Great Schism happened back in the, when was the Great Schism?
That was before the medieval times. I think that was in the...
Hey, Siri?
Wasn't that
when was the Great Schism?
Wasn't that in like the early 6th century? It's the 7th century. What'd Siri say?
Oh, she's not speaking to me.
She said, well, it's probably because you got a Bluetooth hooked up.
1054.
Oh, so I was, a little bit later than I thought.
And I have a really interesting book on the story of the Eastern history, Eastern Church. But in this, there's a lot of good things that happen. And honestly, the modern day Roman Catholic Church, a lot of their, I would say, correction of doctrine that they have right now started because of this, because the whole idea of the Reformation was not to start new churches.
No, it was actually trying to
purify the church.
It was a correction course action is what it was. When Luther nailed the 95 Theses to the wall, he was still wanting to be part of the Catholic Church.
Right.
He wasn't trying to break off from the Catholic Church. He's trying to say, no, let's get back to what the Catholic Church was.
Right. And this is what's wild is Martin Luther still believed in infant baptism. He still believed in purgatory. Right. He still actually believed in the papacy. He just called
100%.
He just called the guy, whatever pope was there, he called him the ass that sat on St. Peter's throne. Sorry, now it's an explicit podcast, but that was Martin Luther's own words.
Right.
Like he literally said that about the Pope.
Right.
And because he said that's St. Peter's throne and you need to get off of it unless you do these things. And so Martin Luther was calling for repentance inside the Catholic Church. Right. And then you have, John, you have Calvin who came after a little bit down in, was he Switzerland? He was Switzerland.
Yes.
And he wrote the Institutes when he was like early 20s, I think, when he started writing
21, if I remember correctly.
And which is interesting. Calvin's Calvinism was not the main part of his theology. It was actually the last chapter he wrote.
Calvin doesn't believe in Calvinism.
Not fully, no.
To the hyperbolic.
Yes.
Or, it's
Calvin wouldn't
funny.
be a Calvinist.
I have a book over there. It's called The Handbook of Calvin. And it's a very good read about really what Calvin did believe and what Calvin did teach, which is nothing like the hyper Calvinism that we see today.
Yep. So there's a lot of good things that came of it. And, I actually had some good conversations with my brother-in-law, Joe, about the idea of like, what, how do you know what's true and what's not? And there's the one question that I heard from a Catholic apologist who said, there's one question that Christians cannot answer. And it comes down to baptism and how baptism works, because we all have different views on baptism. We all have different views on communion in the Eucharist. We have different views on different parts of Scripture. And, Martin Luther's answer when he was asked the question of, well, how are you going to protect the purity of our history and our theology and our culture? And he goes, hey, as long as the gospel go forth, who gives a rip? Let it go.
Secondary issue.
Trust the Holy Spirit's leading in that. And there is something to be said of the early church where, yes, there were bishops in place that their jobs were the elders of the church. Their job as elders, as listed in Paul, is to protect the teach, not just protect as like, in a powerful way, but literally in a make sure we hold to the teachings of Jesus and the apostles, because that's what it's all about. And so the reformers were calling back to the solas,
Right.
By grace alone, through faith alone, in Christ alone, through the scripture alone, to the glory of God alone. Like that's what the whole idea of the Reformation was. And the idea of the fact of not just that we have, we can't have any new revelation or ideas of this. It's the fact of, no, it's the fact of all of a sudden people have put their own opinions and tradition of what we've always done ahead of the scriptures. They've taken away the simplicity and the purity and the beauty of what the gospel message was. In the medieval times, the gospel, though, started becoming more of a dualistic idea,
right?
Where it was, oh, no, we just care about the soul. We just care about the soul. We just care about the soul. And then there was a, rebuttal about, no, we got to care about the physical too. But if we really understand what the gospel is, the fact of Jesus is king, he's on his throne, one day he's going to come back and reestablish his throne. But until then, we're called to follow Jesus and to do good works in his name and honor and glorify God. In the Westminster Confession to the chief end of man is to know God and enjoy him forever.
Right.
And, is the chief end just to evangelize? No, but we're supposed to do that along the way as we're going. We're supposed to tell people, hey, the king is here. Jesus is here. The new kingdom is here. We can all be a part of it. We can all be the sons and daughters of God. As C.S. Lewis says, there's a God-sized hole in every heart. We can show them what that hole is. And if we study church history a little bit, we can see how we can stand for our faith and understand these things, because so many times the importance of when we look at these parts of church history, we can see what they were fighting against back then to see how can we fight against these things now. Wow, your boy went on a rabbit trail real hard there.
You went real hard, and we're going to have to pause right there.
Oh, man.
So, we're going to dive into...
where are we picking up next week?
The last 3 ages is... we're going to hit the last 3 ages next week, the sources of church history, and what is the benefit, and why should we study church history.
All right, man. So
tune in next week.
But before we go, we got to give people some action steps to go along the way. I've given some of my opinions already, so I won't be done talking. So from what we talked about so far, what encouragement or challenge would you like to give the RTC family before we jump to fun facts?
Tune in next week.
That's it.
That's it. That's all I'm going to leave. You're going to have to wait to hear my opinions on everything till next week.
Well, okay then.
Time for Fun Facts with Filler.
Man, we put a hard pause on that episode.
Had to. We got time constraints again, and you guys know when there's time constraints, we got to pause.
That's true. And Joe was just making fun of me for our 2-hour-long episode about our debate on live Facebook. He's like, dude, I gotta listen. Oh no, the church membership. I gotta listen to an hour and 40 minutes. Well, there you go, buddy. You're welcome.
Now we're at an hour. So the fun fact of the day.
What is the fun fact of the day?
Did you know the name of the Pringle shape is a hyperbolic paraboloid?
What?
Paraboloid.
It's an actual shape?
Hyperbolic paraboloid. The
heck?
saddle shape of a Pringle chip is known in math as a hyperbolic paraboloid. Pringles were made in the shape because it allows the chips to be stacked easily and kept in place during packaging.
Well, see, okay, that makes sense, but I just assumed the shape of a Pringle was the shape of a Pringle. I just figured it out.
I thought that was the math version of it, the Pringle shape.
So apparently, like our math teacher said in high school, you may have to use this one day. The Pringle people sure dang did.
Yeah, they did. Hyperbolic paraboloid.
Okay.
Hyperbolic.
Some of you people who are in high school and still doing calculus or trig, I don't know which one this would pertain to. Ask your teacher, hey, can we draw a hyperbolic paraboloid? Am I reading that right?
Hyperbolic paraboloid.
All I know is that Pringles are really dang good.
Delicious, especially the salt and vinegar.
Salt and vinegar.
That's what I'm talking about.
But you know what also is good?
What's that?
Taking part in the Facebook group that we have going on. We're getting close to 1,000 members over there where there's conversations happening every single day based on the episodes that we have right now, based on questions people have in life. And hey, we even throw funny memes in there and just have a good old time with those folks. So we have a lot of friends now in the RTC community who hopefully will be at Revive Fest so we can meet in person. But if you are wanting to continue these conversations, I'm going to challenge you right now. Go to Facebook, not the dating app. There is no Real Talk dating app, just the Real Talk Christian Online Facebook community. Hop over there and take part of those conversations.
And don't forget to check us out on YouTube if you haven't already. And if you have, you're getting to see our pretty faces right now. If you haven't, hop over to YouTube, hit that subscribe button and the bell notification so when we're on, you know.
And just like always, if you have an episode that you're like, hey, did they talk about that? I don't really know. You can always go to the website, realtalkchristianpodcast.com. Hit the search icon, search for that episode, and it will just pop up right there on your screen. Don't forget to leave a rating review, Apple Podcasts, rating Spotify, and anywhere else podcasts can be found. Anything else, Fuller? Are we good?
I think that's it, my friend.
All right, my friend. So, hey, guys, until next time, then.
Take it easy.